In this video, we will discuss what it means for your Helium miner to be relayed and how it affects your earnings. Hey folks, this is Roy and welcome back to my channel, HNT. Let us first try to understand how the Helium network works and what it means to be relayed. So in this illustration, I have considered a bunch of Helium miners which are connected to each other. So in an ideal network, all the miners will be able to reach each other. So any miner will be able to communicate with another hotspot in the network. Currently there are about more than 500,000 Helium miners in the network. And the majority of the earnings come from participating in proof of coverage challenges. So let's see how this works in an ideal situation. So one of the miner will be the challenger and it will construct a challenge. This means it will perform some form of calculation and try to send this information to another hotspot. And if this challenge is accepted by another hotspot, you will see an event which is called challenged beaconer. So these events you can see in the activity tab in the Helium Explorer and also in the app. So not all constructed challenges are accepted. Once it is accepted, you get this event. Okay. After getting this challengee or beaconer will broadcast a beacon signal which is using the LoRa frequency. For example, 915 MHz for the US and 868 MHz for the Europe. And this beacon signal will be received by other hotspots in its proximity. For example, let's say these other hotspots receive this beacon signal. And then these hotspots need to submit the receipt that they have received this beacon signal from this hotspot to the original challenger. So after this information is received by the challenger, it will analyze the information and check for the validity. So in that case, we will get an event which is called witnessed beacon. And if at least one of the witnesses are valid, then the relevant hotspot owners will receive HNT rewards. And this process has to be done within a given time frame. So after everything is complete, the challenger will earn HNTs because it created a challenge, and the beaconer hotspot will achieve some HNT because it sent a beacon signal which was validated by others, and the other witnesses which got valid witness will also receive HNTs. So this is how the proof of coverage procedure works. However, in a real world, the hotspots are not directly connected to each other. They need to use internet for communication, and the internet comes through ISPs or internet service provider. If the hotspot was directly connected to an ISP, it would have gotten a public IP, which something looks like this. And then all the hotspots could talk to each other using the port 44158. However, the actual scenario is more complicated because you usually use a router in your house. That is because you need to connect multiple devices using the router. And this router acts like a firewall. It means that any information that the miner wants to send out, it can send it and it can receive the information at the same port. However, if a random miner in the network tries to reach this miner, this packet will be blocked through the firewall. That means that even though your miner can communicate to some other miner in the network, a random miner in the network cannot communicate to this miner. And this situation is called relayed. In this case, what happens is that this miner needs to depend on another miner in the network which is non-relayed to communicate it. So basically any other miner has to go through this miner in order to reach this relayed miner. So it basically increases the burden of the network, in particular for this miner, which now needs to work more because it has to do its own calculation. On top of that, it has to also communicate with this particular miner all the time. If you want to learn through which Helium miner your Helium hotspot is relayed, there is a way to check it. So just go to the Helium Explorer and find out your hotspot. So in this case, I have picked up a random one which is relayed, you can see here. So then you just copy the address of the Helium miner here. This is the Helium address, you just copy it here, or also you can copy this address which is the last part here. Okay. So after you copy it, you go to this address which is api.helium.io/v1/hotspots and then paste the address of the miner here. Here I am using the Mozilla Firefox which parses the JSON data. And under the listen address, you can see this says P2P something something, and then P2P circuit, P2P something. So the last part is basically the address of your miner, and the first part, this P2P address, is the miner through which your Helium miners is relayed. So to check that miner, we can just go to again explorer.helium.com/hotspots and then paste this address, and it will show you which is this other miner. So in this case is this miner, which is somewhere in New York, and the miner which was relayed was in Chicago. So it doesn't matter, it could be anywhere in the world through which your miners is relayed. Okay, so if you want to fix relayed, I have already discussed that in another video. You can check that out. You will find the link in the description as well as the top right corner. So this is the end of the first part. Now we will try to understand how relayed status affects your earnings. Okay, so the first situation is when your hotspot acts as a challenger. So I described it earlier. So let's say in this case your hotspot created a challenge, and that is accepted by another hotspot in the network, and then it sends a beacon signal which is received by other hotspots, and now they need to send the witness receipts back to your miner, and the information will be mostly I witnessed a beacon signal from this particular hotspot. But the problem is, since it is relayed, this information will be blocked. It will not be able to send it through, and that is why in this case there will be no witnesses from this beacon signal, and as a result there will be no rewards paid to any of the participating miners. Even though they performed the calculation or they participated, they will not be rewarded with any HNT. So this is one of the reasons you often see that your beacon signal had no witnesses. So let me show you what I mean. So I have picked one example here. So you can see that in this case, so normally, let's say normally you when you broadcast a beacon signal, you get a lot of witnesses. In this case, let's say 14 or 10 order of that. In most cases, you get valid witnesses. But then suddenly, your broadcasted signal didn't receive any witness. So in this case, we click here and go to the challenger. So right click, go to the new tab, and you will see that most likely the reason is that challenger is relayed. So for example, you can see here. If it's not relayed, it might be due to an internet connectivity problem or temporary problem with communication. But in most cases, this is the main reason that your beacon signals did not end up with any witness. Okay, so this was the first case. Then the second case is when your relayed hotspots act as a challengee or beaconer. So somebody else in the network created a challenge, and your hotspot now should become a beaconer. But this hotspot needs to transmit this information to your miners, saying that please transmit a beacon signal. But again, the same problem, due to the firewall, it will not go through. As a result, you will have no beacon. Does it mean that the relayed hotspots will have no beacon? No, because in most cases this beacon request will not go through, but remember, it can still communicate through this other hotspot. So if this hotspot sends the information here and that is reached to your hotspot in time, you will have a beacon, and you can send a beacon signal, you will receive witnesses, and assuming that this challenger is non-relayed, everything will go through normally and everyone will be rewarded HNT. However, you can see that the sum of the beacon requests will not go through. As a result, you will have reduced beacons for a relayed hotspot. And the last case is relayed hotspot as a witness. So in this case, someone in the network created a challenge and somebody else beaconed, and you received that beacon signal. So you become the witness. And now you have to send this information back to the original challenger. However, you cannot do it directly. You have to now go through this other miner in the network, and that puts some extra work for this miner. And what happens that often this miner doesn't end up sending this information back to the challenger in time, because there is a time limit for this whole process. So as a result, you do not get the witness and you do not earn any HNT just because you are relayed. So in general, what will happen is that your miner being relayed will earn less witnesses, and as a result, less rewards. I guess you now have a basic understanding of how a relayed miner affects your mining performance. However, if you want to get a number like what is the percentage of reduction, it's really very difficult to put a number. That is because it strongly depends on the other miner through which your miner is relayed. If the other miner has a very good internet connection and it's pretty close by, then your performance might still be very good even if you are relayed. But let's say the other miner is actually in a different continent or has a pretty bad internet connection, then that will also reduce your performance. If you want to have a number, it could be anywhere between 10% to 40%. So a reduction of 10% to 40% when you are relayed. I hope this information was useful to you. If you have any more questions, let me know in the comments section. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, guys, and get cryptonized.